So good afternoon or morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you for attending today's Selling to Empowered Customers webinar. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today, Microsoft CRM Sales Director Connor Marsden and author of The Challenger Sale, Brent Adamson. Connor, you have the floor.
Terrific, thank you, and good afternoon or morning based on when you're dialed in. Really excited to have you here for this exciting topic. My name's Connor Marsden, and I help lead our CRM business here in the U.S. Market, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Brent Adamson, who is a frequent contributor to Forbes magazine, a thought leader in the sales and marketing space, and I was just mentioned a co-author of The Challenger Sale. And we're excited to have a discussion on trends and topics that are happening, quite frankly, in the market today and potentially with inside your organization. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brent. Brent, take it away.
Hey, Connor, and hello, everyone. Just so excited to be with you today to spend roughly about 45, 50 minutes talking about some of the things that we're seeing in our work that hopefully are going to impact every one of us on the call today, whether you're in sales, marketing, commercial excellence, wherever you might be in the commercial organization. We're tracking some really interesting and I guess some ways some troubling trends that I think are going to have a pretty significant impact on all of us going forward. Just by way of background, so you understand what you're about to see across the next hour or so. Again, my name is Brent Adamson. I work with an organization called CEB, formerly the Corporate Executive Board. Think of us essentially as a research organization. So specifically, I sit in the sales and marketing portion of our company, and I'm part of a larger team that we spend all of our time sort of working with heads of sales, heads of marketing in the business-to-business space around the world, trying to understand with a huge amount of data and research and quantitative, qualitative analysis, what does world-class selling and marketing look like? Now, Connor, I'd tell you that the last thing I think any of us wants to do is go through an hour of data, so I won't do that today. But rather, what I think would be really interesting is, as you and I we'll have a conversation around this. But what I'd like to do is share with the audience today just a story. But it's a story that indeed does come out of all that data, and it's a story that applies to every single one of us. But what's interesting, as much as we spend all of our time studying sales and marketing, this story isn't actually about selling or marketing. It's actually a story about buying. Because in many ways, as we've gone through all of our work in a huge amount of detail over the last 3 or 4 years, what we're finding is that the single biggest story in selling and marketing today is not how we're selling differently. It's how our customers are buying differently. And that buying behavior really does change everything. In fact, Connor, I think you'd appreciate this being in sales as long as you have. I spent a lot of time traveling around the world. Connor, you ever meet the senior sales professional who's been selling for 25, 30 years, and they look at you and say, look, I've been selling for 30 years. I have been selling incredibly well. I've been very effective. I've been in President's Club for 15 years running. I've been to Cancun more times than a native. I've got more Lucite trophies on my credenza than anyone else in my company. And you can't tell me that I don't know what I'm doing in selling, and you can't tell. There's nothing new in the world of sales because it's all the same, and it's always and I think I've got it figured out. And Connor, you know what I'm talking about? You ever talk to that person?
Oh, I meet that individual very, very frequently, yes.
Right. So, what I found in working with individuals like that is that, first of all, is to be incredibly respectful of that incredible track record of success over those 25, 30 years. But the thing that I find so interesting is that in many ways the story is just as interesting for that individual as everyone else, because the last thing I would say to that individual is what you're doing is wrong, or what you have done is wrong. But keep in mind, this story isn't about selling differently. It's about buying differently. So really what I want to share with you all today is let's take a look at what happens when we take that old world of selling that has been so effective for so many years and run it right into the teeth of the new world of buying. Because in many ways, that's the drama. That's where things start to fall apart in some pretty surprising ways. Now, just to show you what I mean, let me show you just a very simple slide that kind of it almost is like a history lesson of sort of where we all are in sort of the world of selling and marketing today. And it's kind of an interesting sort of way to think about it. But over the last 5, 10, 15 years, virtually every B2B organization, large or small, doesn't matter, has been on the same journey. And I've been doing a lot of sales meetings this time of year around the world, and this is a theme that's come up a lot even in the last several months, which is our organization is on a journey from selling individual products to selling bigger, broader, more complex solutions. So, and the reason why it makes a ton of sense, right? So if you're selling individual products that can be easily copied, easily commoditized, it's just sort of a race to the bottom. So if you can add additional products, additional services, additional capabilities, wraparounds, that allows you to differentiate yourself in the market and provide to your customers not just a product, but an overall solution, something that's specifically designed to solve their broader business needs. And today's not the day I would ever get on the phone and tell you that that's a bad idea. This is a journey that we all have to go on to maintain differentiation, maintain or earn higher margins in the marketplace. But here's where the story gets really interesting, because if you stop and think about, if we're going to go on this solutions journey and sell solutions that are specifically designed to solve our customers' needs, well, then what do we have to understand better than ever before? What we have to understand is what our customers actually need. So what we've watched at CEB in all of our work over the last 5 to 10 years is just a very strong movement and a natural movement in sales and marketing organizations towards a greater degree of customer centricity. Because if we're going to sell a solution that solves customers' needs, we've got to understand what those needs are, right? So we build the customer-centric organization. We put the customer at the center of everything that we do. We have to surround the customer with all of our work. And so on the marketing side, it's better customer surveys, SAT scores, voice of the customer, net promoter score. On the sales side, it's better discovery questions. What are you working on? What do you have to get right this year? What are your top priorities? And that allows us to build a deeper customer understanding than ever before, which leads to better customer relationships and allows us to deliver a higher level of customer value. You can see from the title of this slide, it all made sense, right? And again, today is not the day where I would say, what were we thinking? That was a horrible idea. You have to do this, right? You have to build that customer-centric organization, and sales and marketing. We're all designed to kind of put the customer first in everything that we do, and so that we can identify their needs and not just meet those needs, but exceed those needs, and then delight our customers in the process. But this is where, again, the story takes this really strange left turn, because then something happened. And what happened is what we often portray as a great big blue arrow. And let me tell you a little bit about this blue arrow, what's going on, and maybe, Connor, I'll take a breath, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, and sort of what you're seeing. And by all means, as all of you are listening in, if you've got questions or thoughts or reactions that you'd like to share, just put them in the chat box. It would be fantastic. And I'll be happy to address anything that comes up. But let me tell you about this blue arrow, because this blue arrow, it changes everything in some really dramatic ways. So what this blue arrow actually represents is a very simple but powerful idea, but also represents a huge amount of data. So over the last 4 or 5 years, or 3 or 4 years now at CEB, we've been running a huge number of customer surveys. These are individual stakeholders all involved in a B2B purchase in some fashion across geographies, industries, go-to-market models, you name it. And and in these surveys, we're asking all sorts of questions about where do you get your information, who's involved in the purchase, how do you decide, did you have budget, you name it. Trying to understand that purchase journey better and more deeply than ever before. Now, as part of that work, one of the things that we've been doing recently is asking what we thought originally was a very simple question, but we ask all of these thousands of individuals here in this graphic. It's about 4,000 individuals represented here. We simply ask them, if you think about a purchase journey, a typical purchase of a B2B solution on a continuum from sort of due diligence begins there on the left to the actual purchase decision on the right. The question simply was, at what point in that purchase journey do you typically pick up the phone or fire up the email and proactively reach out to a supplier sales rep to get their input on whatever it is that you're doing? And that number come back at 57%. And it's a very robust number. By the way, it's interesting, Connor, about this data here, this 57%. The distribution in the data is not a very wide one. So it doesn't run from 27 to 97. It runs from about mid-40s to mid-60s with an average of 57. And really counterintuitively, but it makes sense if you think about it, the more complex the deal, the later your customers call you, which is actually pretty troubling as we continue to move into deeper, more complex solutions. But here's why this matters. So let me lay this out, and then again, I'll stop, take a breath, and I'd love to get thoughts on this. But you stop and think about why that blue arrow matters. What's that 57 all about, that 57%? And why should I care? Well, you stop and think about what's happening inside that blue arrow. Chances are pretty good that your customers are now doing on their own all the things that we were hoping to do with them together as a solutions provider, right? So they're identifying a need. They're prioritizing that need relative to other needs. They're figuring out what are the capabilities we need to deliver on that need. Who are the suppliers that could help us build out that capability? How much do they cost? So that by the time that deal comes to us at the tip of that blue arrow, it typically comes to us in the form of an RFP or a tendering process where there's very little left to discuss but price. One head of sales we know very well, he told us, look, that blue arrow, he said, that's a freight train to RFP station. And we're on it. And it's such a painful sort of reality, but it's also one that we all know to be true because as consumers, every single one of us does the exact same thing, right? It's kind of like buying a car today. When's the last time anyone walked into a car dealership and sat down with a sales rep and said, tell me about the cars you have on offer this year, right? You don't do that because you don't have to. It's kind of absurd even, right? Instead, what you do is you do all of your research in advance. You walk into that car dealership, you sit down with that sales rep, and you say, I want this car in this color with these options and this engine. I won't pay a dime over this price, and I want it on Tuesday. And you get a little annoyed if the sales rep tries to talk you out of it, right? But stop and think about that story from the perspective of that sales rep. That sales rep is no longer the sales department. They're the fulfillment department, and it's really hard to grow your business when your sales team has just become the fulfillment team. But this is where we are simply because we live in a world where your customers do this because they can. And that's what's so different about the world today. It's not that I've been selling for 30 years and nothing has changed. It's rather your customers have been buying for even longer, but they can do things today that they couldn't do just a few short years ago. In fact, just one last thought on this, just to show you just how different this world really is, because it's fascinating and frankly kind of scary. Here's a really interesting thought exercise to consider when you look at that blue arrow. I'd like for everyone, there's a couple hundred people on the call today. I'd love for everyone to think about, just briefly, think about your top 2 competitors. Think about the companies that you go head-to-head with every single day out there in the marketplace. Now, as you're thinking about those 2 competitors, and there's probably more for many of us, ask yourself, where would you place them on this continuum? Where are customers most likely to pick up the phone and call their sales reps? Or even better, if we had them on the call today, where would they place themselves on this continuum? Because I bet I actually can guess. And the answer is more likely than not. You know where they are? They're at the tip of the exact same blue arrow. And we know this not only through data, but from a huge amount of experience. The companies tell us, I'll be on the phone back in my office in Washington, D.C. at 9 o'clock in the morning on the phone with the head of sales saying, Brent, we're at the tip of that blue arrow. We're getting shut out. We're getting commoditized. We've got to get in earlier. And, how do we do that? We have that conversation. 3 hours later, I'm on the phone with one of their direct competitors, and they're saying, Brent, we're at the tip of that blue arrow. We're getting shut out. We're getting commoditized. We've got to get in earlier. And so the point of this actually really matters, because what happens when you put it all together, what you realize is that in a world of information where your customers can now learn on their own, what we're finding is that customers equipped with information aren't just shutting out your sales reps, they're shutting out all sales reps. And that's a very different dynamic altogether. The thing that got us to the tip of this blue arrow that's driving down margins and driving down deal size and is killing our solutions business, it's not our competition's ability to sell that got us to the tip of the blue arrow, but our own customers' ability to learn on their own. But think about what that means, right? We've just spent the last 5, 10, 15 years building a customer-centric organization where the customer comes first, the customer's at the center of everything we do, where the customer is always right. But in this world, if the customer is always right, we're actually in big trouble. And it tells us this really mind-bending conclusion, which is so fascinating about the world today that we live in, which is in many ways our number one biggest competitor today is not the competition and their ability to sell. Our biggest competitor today is our own customer and their ability to learn on their own. And that's led us to this really strange world of asking, what does it even mean to compete against our own customer? I mean, that's just not something we're used to even saying out loud. It doesn't make sense. So much of our work today is asking that question. What does it mean to successfully compete, win bigger deals at higher margins in a world where in many ways our number one competitor is our own customer and their ability to learn on their own? And so over the balance of the next 30, 40 minutes, I'll share with you some ideas on what that looks like. But Connor, I would imagine in your world of selling CRM, and just for listeners as well, if you're seeing questions come in, that's got to sound pretty familiar, I would imagine. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that's super fair. In fact, just to share a quick personal story, I was just up at National Retail Federation, NRF, the big show in New York City, sitting down with a 1,000-store, a business executive from a 1,000-store retail chain, and they were about to implement some new technology, and they did all their research. They went to Gartner. Gartner chose the vendors they should select. Yeah. Unfortunately, Microsoft wasn't actually on that list. We actually have a different point of view on the space. And the scary thing was, if we didn't actually intercept, we never would have heard about that opportunity. We never would have been involved. And now we get an opportunity to try and redirect the conversation and tell our Microsoft story. But it's not only the fact that customers are, we're going to head down that RFP freight train, but customers may not understand our message if we're not putting it out there right in the market, and we may get bypassed altogether, which is another frightening proposition as well.
Absolutely. In fact, there's two things particular that jump out at me and sort of you're sharing your story is that, the one is whether it's Gartner or anyone else, right? This is the rise and the power of third-party consultants and outside vendors in this story, which is not something we know is there, and our member companies that we work with, hundreds of them all over the world. It doesn't matter the industry, are all telling us the same thing over the last 4 or 5 years, just the incredibly dramatic and rapid rise of just outside consultants and vendors involved in that blue era. And I'll never forget one head of sales, a chief growth officer is actually his title at a global company. Everyone, I think, on the call today would recognize the name of the company, but he said, looked at me, his name is Jeff, and he said, Brent, you know what drives me crazy? I said, no, what, Jeff? He said, Brent, here's what drives me crazy about these outside vendors is half the time they're actually former salespeople that I fired from my own company 2 years ago for not being able to sell effectively. Now they're out using outdated sales tools to actually compete against me in this blue arrow, and it's just driving me crazy. But it also leads to another conclusion, which I think is so interesting. I've heard this all over the world, which is, whether or not your customers actually, quote unquote, get it right in that blue arrow is a totally different question, isn't it, right? So oftentimes your customers come to you, they lay it all out and say, here's what we need. Do you want to participate in the bake-off? And you look at it and say, that's not even good for your business. But the freight train's already left the station, and at that point, many decisions have been made that are very difficult to undo.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we see that all the time, and it's how do we get everything coordinated from our marketing to our salespeople to make sure that we're getting our message out there in a way that our customers can understand, and just knowing that a lot of this process is happening without our our involvement. It's a tricky proposition, that's for sure.
Agreed. In fact, there's something about this that's really interesting because, we spend just as much time talking to marketers about this blue arrow as we do to salespeople, right? So from the sales perspective, the question becomes, how do I compete at the tip of the blue arrow, or more importantly, how do I crack open the blue arrow? How do I get in earlier? How do I engage customers earlier? From a marketing perspective, the story could be partly how do I support sales in making that happen, but part of the marketing story is in many ways very different too, which is in a world where my sales reps can't be there to have that conversation with the customers, how can I use all of the other tools and content and channels and products and capabilities in the marketing organization to get in front of the customer through other channels if the sales channel is no longer a viable option, or at least not the only viable option. And so you can imagine, in fact, we'll come back to this in a minute, from a marketing perspective, the urgency around this diagram or data point is just as high. Well, tell you, why don't let me answer the question. So how to, or at least give a possible or potential, in fact, a very dramatic answer to how we crack open that blue arrow, particularly from the customer's perspective, because there's something really interesting about this blue arrow, right? So if we want to be part of that customer's learning journey, we got to figure out what can we do. And there's a word we've invented for this, by the way, which is if the goal here is not just to compete against your competition's ability to sell, but your own customer's ability to learn on their own, the only way that you can really do that, the only sort of coin of the realm that we have found that allows you to do those two things simultaneously is something that we're going to call insight, and we'll dive into this in a little more detail as well today. But insight, this ability to, as we like to say, unteach your customers, right? Unteach, yes, we totally made that word up, so it's not very scientific, but it's really descriptive of what we're talking about here, is your ability to unteach your customers, to essentially demonstrate to them credibly that somewhere along the line of that blue arrow that they have missed something materially important to their business. So despite all of their learning, despite all of their due diligence, that somewhere along the way they've missed something, that a new way to make money or save money or mitigate risk or penetrate markets that's materially important for their business, allows them to compete more effectively, that they themselves have overlooked. Now, if you were to ask your customers, is that kind of perspective from a supplier valuable, we actually can provide a data-driven answer in a really dramatic way. So this bar chart you're looking at here essentially is an answer to the question, if we were to go out, one way to think of this bar chart is, if we were to go out and ask thousands and thousands of customers all over the world, what could a supplier do to crack open that blue arrow, what would the answer be? It technically is actually a measure of customer loyalty. Now, there's a longer version of this one slide, because I'll tell you this is true. This one slide you're looking at here has made it into more boardroom-level conversations than anything else we've ever published in our 20, 30 years of sales and marketing research, because it answers the question, what do customers truly care about in the supplier? But it answers it in a very non-intuitive way. And where this bar chart came from was just about 6,000 or 7,000 individual customer stakeholders, again, that we've surveyed all over the world, asking them essentially to rate one supplier versus similar suppliers across a wide range of attributes. So did product attributes, brand attributes, service delivery, value to price ratio, purchase experience. There's about 60 different attributes we were studying here in terms of how this stakeholder, this customer, compares this supplier versus similar suppliers across about 60 different attributes that might matter. And then in the same survey, we also asked all those individuals 3 questions that allowed us to gauge their level of loyalty. And for us, and Connor, I would imagine you can appreciate this too, for us, when we gauge loyalty in our research, it's not simply are you satisfied or do you like us or you're happy. Well, those things are hugely important. We find nonetheless satisfied customers leave you every single day, right? So for us, it's the 3 questions are on a scale of 1 to 7 for us, but how willing are you to keep buying from the supplier? How willing are you to buy even more from the supplier going forward? So more of the same, additional products, additional services, go on that solutions journey with us. And how willing are you to advocate on that supplier's behalf? Now I got a measure of your loyalty, and I got a measure of how you think about this supplier versus similar suppliers. I can put all that together mathematically, run what's called a factor analysis, then a regression analysis. All of that is a way to get a bar chart that looks like this. And what that bar chart tells you is of all the things you could do as a supplier to win customer loyalty, what things actually matter and in what proportion. And there's this really fascinating thing to find over on the right, which we'll get to in a second, but really briefly, over on the left, there's this very counterintuitive but nonetheless powerful finding, which is if you look at the first bar, just the company that you are, the brand of your company, the brands of your products, and the second bar, the products themselves, the performance of those products, the service with which we deliver those products. Now, in the what's called the factor analysis and the statistical analysis, all those things fell together in those 2 categories in a statistically significant way. And what that tells you is if you add up those first 2 bars, 19 plus 19, 38%, what that tells you is 38% of customer loyalty is a direct result of your ability to outperform the competition across product, brand, and service. And so the first thing we always tell every company is, whatever you do, don't ever take your foot off that gas pedal, right? So having a world-class brand backed by having a world-class product backed by a world-class brand, delivered through world-class service, surely matters, and we now know that statistically as well as just intuitively and anecdotally and practically, right? But the flip side is, at 38%, the surprising thing is those 2 bars are kind of low, aren't they? I mean, I think particularly when chief marketing officers look at this graphic, they say, yep, Brent, totally agree. Product, brand, service. Yeah, those things are that's the holy trinity of driving customer loyalty. Of course those things matter. There's no surprise there. But wait a minute. Why are those 2 bars so small? That should be not 38%, but 88%, 98%. After all, that's the play we've all been running. And so it led us to try and understand. So they'd ask us, why are those 2 bars so small? And we always had an answer, which is, I have no idea. So we had to go back and do a lot of follow-up research to try to understand that very question. Why are these bars so small? And to cut to the answer, what happens after a lot of follow-up research, what we found is it's not that these things don't matter, because they absolutely do. It's just that our customers don't see nearly as large a difference between us and the competition across product, brand, and service as we do ourselves. They'll say, no, don't get me wrong, that company's got a great product. We love their product. But you know what? The other guy's got a really good product too. Or we love their brand. It's just as good as this other company's brand. In other words, what you see here in this bar chart is a measure of differentiation. Technically, it's of statistical variability. And what you find is that customers don't see nearly as large a difference between one supplier and another across product, brand, and service as those suppliers do themselves, because that's what they get paid to see. And then it leads us then to the next logical question, which is, so where do they see the difference? It's in that the 4th bar on the right, which is the actual purchase experience itself. It's the actual conversations those suppliers are having with those customers out there in the field every day, on the phone, in the field, in the trenches, even through marketing and their content. That's where they actually see the difference between one supplier and another, because and they were kind of mean about this. Connor, you can appreciate this, right? You ever read those blog posts in the comments section, just the horrible, awful things that people say there, and you kind of lose faith in humanity if you spend too much time in comment sections and blog posts. But it's funny, in customer surveys, in the anonymous write-in comments, it's not that much different. And customers will say some horrible things about salespeople there. This is I give 60 minutes to a sales rep, and they'll show up and they'll throw up in my office and they'll walk me through the history of their company, and they'll lay out their brochure, and they'll say in 1865 we were found in the back of a pickup truck. It's I don't care. It's shoot me now. It's that's 60 minutes of my life you owe me back. I mean, customers are really mean about this, but they'd say at the same time, other sales reps, they show up on my office, I give them 60 minutes, and we don't have a conversation about my company. We don't have a conversation about their company. We have a conversation about my company. In those 60 minutes, I learn more about my company, new ways to compete, than I typically learn from my own colleagues across the last 3 months. And that's why this bar is so big, is the massive amount of differentiation that customers see from one supplier to another in the actual purchase experience itself. And when you dig into that and ask, well, what needs to happen in that purchase experience to win that kind of loyalty, it's the bullets you see on the right side of the slide, which is the sales rep offers unique and valuable perspectives on the market. The sales rep helps me navigate alternatives. The sales rep helps me avoid potential landmines and educates me on new issues and outcomes. And so this is the customer, thousands of them all over the world, saying, you know what we're really looking for in a supplier? We're looking for a supplier who can make me smarter. Teach me something new. Show me ways to be more competitive. So you think back to that blue arrow. Despite all of my learning, all of my research, all of the information that's available to me, if you can come to me and show me a new way to think about, not about your company, but show me a new way to think about my company, new ways to compete, that's your ticket into the blue arrow. That's essentially how you unteach a customer, by demonstrating to them that you've got insight into their company and how they can compete more effectively that they fail to fully appreciate on their own. So you put it all together, that fourth bar there, to what it tells you is a 53% of customer loyalty, over half. It's not a result of what we sell. It's a result of how we sell. It's the quality of the insight we share every single day as part of that sale, as part of those customer conversations, to essentially unteach the customer. And this is how you compete against the customer's ability to learn on their own, by having something to teach them that they can't learn on their own.
So, so one question just jumps to mind, and I'm sure it's jumping to mind from the folks on the call.
Yeah.
So this, in a lot of situations, the salesperson is the one who just coordinates the experts to come in and meet. But in this model, almost, the salesperson has to be the expert, has to be the one delivering the insights. They can't just be a pass-through to some degree. So does that mean that people need to take a hard look at what the composition of their sales force is, what they look like, their experiences, et cetera? Are you seeing that with some of your member companies?
Absolutely. In fact, we'll come to that in a little bit more detail in just a second. But at a high level, there's kind of two ways to look at this, I think, Connor. There's one is you can think of this as a sort of a commercial organization. So we as a commercial organization, our overall posture has to be one of, are we teaching or unteaching our customers? Are we providing them new insight? And again, this is where, if you think back to that blue arrow, particularly today more than ever before, some of that teaching is probably going to have to be done through channels or in addition to your direct sales force, or for that matter, indirect sales force, through content marketing, for example, because that may be the only way that your customer is actually accessing you early in the purchase process. But at the same time, it also means a pretty significant rewrite of sales rep behavior itself. Again, whether you're on the phone or in the field, direct or indirect, we've seen a lot of companies have to rethink pretty significantly. In fact, just to stay on the slide for just a second, there's one more thing. It's actually not on the slide, but implied here, that just shows you how different this is. So those bullets in that box on the right side, there's just there's 7 of them there, I believe, right? So those are the ones that bubbled up to the top as being most important in defining what a world-class purchase experience looks like in the eyes of a customer. If you were to go, there's actually in the analysis, there's actually not 7 but 19 attributes that landed in that bar. And if you were to kind of list them all out and go all the way down to the bottom, down to 17, less important, 18, even less important in your eyes of your customer, 19, all the way in the bottom, 19. So the least important thing a supplier could do or a sales rep could do in the eyes of your customer, you know what it is? It's this least important in the eyes of your customer is the sales rep understands my needs as well as I do. Came in dead last. And that's really fascinating because, to your point, Connor, that's what we've all in sales been trained to do for the last 3 or 4 years, or the last 5 to 10, 15 years, is to understand our customers' needs, to go in and ask them, what are you working on? What do you got to get right this? What are your priorities? What's keeping you up at night, which we call the single worst question you can ask in sales in an HBR blog one time. But because what your customers are saying with all this data is that we don't need a sales rep who understands our needs as well as we do. We need a sales rep who understands our needs better than we do. And that bar is significantly higher than where most of us have been setting it in sales for a while now. Does that resonate with you, Connor?
No, that absolutely does. I mean, I love how you reframed it, that it's not about the salesperson necessarily, it's about the organization having the learning or the education or the teaching, the teaching culture, and it's also, if I want to rephrase maybe what you said, it's not only what you're teaching me today, but it's also what you're going to teach me in the future. That's going to drive loyalty and me wanting to hang on to that insight over a long-term relationship. That actually makes good sense to me, and something definitely that we see some of our customers share with us when we're out in the field.
And then kind of going back to your question about specific sales reps, this is, and some of the participants on the call today will know, perhaps this is where much of our work on what we've come to call the challenger sale comes from, right? It's actually an independent body research. I'm just going to touch on this briefly because there's something new I want to show starting on the next slide in just a second that kind of takes us not in a different direction but a complementary direction that gets back to this broader perspective. But very specifically in terms of sales professionals, one of the things we know from our research that gave rise to this challenger work in many ways is work that's ongoing for us. It started back in 2009 with about 6,000 sales reps. It's ongoing today with well over 100,000 sales professionals all over the world, every region, geography, you name it, trying to understand what are the behaviors, the skills, the attitudes, the knowledge that set the very best sales reps apart from everyone else. And just today, very briefly, because we go into so much detail in other places, but in running that analysis across about 55 different kinds of behaviors, attitudes, skills, knowledge, and hundreds or thousands and thousands, I should say, of sales professionals, trying to make sense of all that data, one of the first things we did in that massive data set was, again, run what's called a factor analysis on that data. And all a factor analysis does, statistically speaking, is it takes a great big complex set of data and it boils it down to the smallest number of categories where everything in that category moves together in a statistically significant way. Wow, what does all that mean? Well, it just means when you run a factor analysis on all this rep behavior and skills and knowledge data, what you find is that virtually every sales rep around the world has this tendency to fall into one of 5 distinct profiles. And here are the 5 profiles in the slide. Now, again, much more detail in other places on this, but the one thing I think is important to really mention here for anyone seeing this for the first time or maybe for the second or third time is one thing we would emphasize here is we are not, emphatically not saying that these profiles are mutually exclusive, because they're not. It's not that you're all of one profile and none of the other 4. In fact, there's a certain amount of overlap. What's really interesting, by the way, if you dig into the data, is you find that virtually every sales professional is at least has at least average level of performance across just about everything we tested, because everything we tested was important. And so if you're really bad at a subgroup of them, you're probably not in sales for very long at all. Right? But nonetheless, what we found is virtually every sales professional has this tendency to gravitate to a certain subset of those attributes in defining their primary posture when facing off with a customer. And so it's kind of like going to university or college. You have a core curriculum and then you have a primary or major. These are sort of the 5 majors of sales professionals. So you have a hard worker, always willing to go the extra mile, the activity-driven sales rep. He does more calls an hour, more visits per week. They love feedback. That's in the top left. The top middle is the challenger reps. They've got this deep knowledge of the customer's business, but use it to challenge the customer's thinking, to kind of challenge them and take them a little bit out of the customer out of their comfort zone. Top right is the relationship builder, very focused on building relationships, personal and professional advocates across the customer organization. One of the things we know about relationship builders is they're very generous with their time. So their posture is largely, whatever you need, I am here for you. Whatever you want, say the word, I will get it done. This, when you think about that customer centricity, customer-centric strategy, this is the rep profile that will go right along with it, right? The lone wolf is in the bottom left, the prima donna of your sales force follows their own instincts instead of the rules. If you manage, Connor, I'm sure you've managed a few of these in your career, right? So they drive you crazy, right? Because you never know really where they are, or what they're doing. There's no trip reports. There's no CRM entries, right? It's like, frankly, you'd fire them if you could, but you can't because they're crushing their numbers. You never really know what to do with them, right? And then the bottom right is the sort of what we call the problem solver, the reactive problem solver. Very detail-oriented, very focused on making sure that all the promises that are inevitably made as part of a sale get kept once that sale is done. So they got a very strong post-sales focus. Now, the only reason why these 5 profiles are all that interesting is because when you take these 5 profiles and you compare them to performance, what you find is that one of the 5 is performing head and shoulders above the other 4, and one is falling dramatically behind. And the one most likely to be a star performer here is, in fact, that challenger profile up in the top middle. And if you stop and think about what these challenger reps are doing, is they're challenging customers to think differently. They're challenging their thinking. They're essentially unteaching them. They're teaching them something new about their business. And remember, if that sounds familiar, it should, because it's exactly what we just saw on the previous slide and what customers are actually looking for in a supplier. And so if you're kind of a research geek like I am or our whole team is, this is one of those magical moments in research where worlds collide, right? So it's like this is a completely different body of research taken of a completely different group of people, taken at a completely different time, and yet we find the exact same answer when we study sales professionals that we found when we studied customers, that the recipe for success, the most likely way to win in this world, is not the products and services we sell, but the quality of the insight that we bring to the sale itself to challenge challenge our customers' thinking. And so Connor, to your point, this is where we see a lot of sales organizations really focused right now is asking themselves not how can we get more challengers, because ultimately the story isn't about profiles, it's really about behaviors. So it's not what profile are my sales reps, but rather irrespective of whatever profile my reps might fall in today, how can I get any of them more of the same behaviors that allow these challengers to be so effective? So it's less about building challengers and more about building challenger skills and behaviors that we find many of our organizations that we work with around the world focused on quite dramatically right now.
That's awesome, Brent. And so so from an organization standpoint, I want to make sure that that we get to the Q&A.
Yeah.
So how can an organization start the shift? How do they actually prepare themselves to make some of their reps look more and behave more like a challenger? What are one or two pointers that you can provide folks on the phone for how they actually can start that journey?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things practically speaking. One is just an awareness building campaign, around the very topics that we're talking about. And what I've found in working with organizations a lot on this work is that the first couple slides that we went through, what we call the why now, the story of it's not about selling, it's about buying, really matters because it creates a certain urgency that you won't find. Remember how we started this story with that sales professional been selling for 30 years and is telling you, look, there's nothing new under the sun. I've been successful for 30 years. You can't tell me I'm doing it wrong. And it's like you're not doing it wrong in a world where selling is selling, but when in a world where buying is changing, you take that old world of selling and run it in the teeth of the new world of buying, and things start to fall apart. And that story actually really matters to sort of master and share and sort of indoctrinate, socialize is the word we say now, isn't it, across the team, because it creates a sense of, wow, we probably do need to change. Then there's sort of a three-pronged approach that really matters. One is getting leadership, and by the way, I don't mean just sales leadership, I mean leadership, often all the way up to the CEO or very near to it, bought into this story, because what we're talking about here is not a sales approach. It's not a sales methodology, as many sort of kind of interpreted it to be originally. This is commercial strategy. This is about how a supplier goes to market, full stop, across sales, across marketing. We're fascinated by the implications for service, for product development, because it means thinking very differently about how you align your organization. So getting your leadership team bought into these ideas really matters. That's one. Two is getting a marketing or a content engine built and set up to create this insight and sort of produce and distribute that insight through all the various channels that marketing has access to today. So one, providing or equipping sales reps to challenge customers with better insight, but putting that insight out in other channels. And then the third one you would imagine is the sales reps and training them, and we have a big part of our organization that's become essentially a challenger training organization in some really powerful ways that didn't even exist a few years ago. And I would absolutely go there eventually, but it's not where I would go next. The third of the three prongs I would focus on is not sales reps, but sales managers. Because as we all know on the phone today, every single initiative that you attempt in your sales organization is doomed to fail if your sales managers aren't bought in, don't understand it, won't support it, and can't coach it. So making sure that your sales managers understand what Challenger is all about, understand that coaching is crucial, and understand specifically how to coach the Challenger is not only important but crucial to make all this work as you continue to roll out these ideas and get them in front of your sales reps and get people excited about them. And then there's a couple red herring sort of things to watch out for. Again, working with a number of organizations, I found that people can get really wrapped around the axle around what profile am I. And the thing we always have to focus on is it's not about the profiles, it's about the behaviors. Because irrespective of whatever profile you are, the question is what are these behaviors that Challenger reps are engaged in that I can engage into, which we haven't really focused on today, but we focus on in other places in much, much more detail. Does that ring true to you, Connor? I would imagine as a leader yourself, right? Getting leadership on board, marketing on board as an insight generation machine, and sales managers on board would be that's a long answer to a short question, but I think all crucial.
Yeah, nope, that's where we focus on here. It's how can marketing is now effectively a part of the sales cycle. And
that's
they
right.
need to feed the beast. They need to feed the beast externally, and then they need to to make sure that the right information's out there. And then they need to share those insights with the customer, with the sales reps, so they can have really impactful conversations with their customers. And so, yeah, no, we're absolutely saying the same thing. I do have one question here, and Brent, I'll give you 15 seconds to answer this question, but
okay,
everyone's going to ask, okay, so no Challenger's the best. What's the worst?
I did gloss that, didn't I? And by the way, just to be totally fair, I wouldn't, and not to correct you, I wouldn't say the worst, but the least likely to win, or the least likely to be a star performer. It's technically the accurate way to articulate it, but not duly noted. The profile least likely to win is the relationship builder, which is so counterintuitive because they're focused, but the idea is like, if I'm focused on whatever you need, I'm here for you. But what do you do in a world where the number one thing your customer needs is more time to decide and a bigger discount? Now, the big debate we always get in is, does this mean relationships don't matter? But they absolutely matter. Relationships with your customers are crucial, but the question becomes, what is the basis of the relationship that we build with our customers? Is it familiarity? Is it the quarterly check-in call? Or is it quality insight that challenges the way they think?
Perfect. Thanks for that, Brent.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to the next part.
Yeah, so where we really want to take the story today, and there's really, probably 3 slides or even 2.5 that I'll share with everyone today, and what the 5-10 minutes we have remaining. And so because there's something really interesting about this, when we share this challenger or this insight story with sales leaders, with marketing leaders, one of the things, particularly in the marketing side, we find is that is what we call a false positive problem. We get a lot of, Brent, I totally agree, we do need to challenge our customers, think we need to lead with insight, and that's why we've invested so much time and so much money in becoming a thought leader in our industry, because we want to get content out there and better content and better white papers. We've invested in content marketing and new strategies and new technologies to allow us to really position ourselves as a thought leader in our marketplace, because if our customers know that we have interesting, thoughtful things to say, they're going to come to us sooner. We're going to win greater trust. And we were fascinated by that because we weren't really sure that that's actually the full recipe for success in this world where your number one competitor is your own competition, just because your own customer and their ability to learn. So remember, our goal here is we've got to unteach our customers. So one of the things we've done in the last 2 or 3 years, again, is all part of this very big body of research on customer buying behavior, is to try to understand if our goal is to unteach the customer, to disrupt that 57% journey, to move them in a slightly different direction, what is it that we can do in terms of our content and our insight? That's, what are the attributes of content that are most likely going to lead that to happen? So, one thing you can do in these surveys is simply ask your customer stakeholders, what would a supplier have to do to disrupt your thinking? And of course, either they won't know because they've never thought about it that way before, or if they did know, they would never tell you, right? So you can't really kind of straight up ask that question. But without going deep into methodology in these surveys we're running, we ask customers a whole series of questions allowed us to determine to what degree a purchase process they were engaged in ended up in a different place than where it started. So it gives us a measure of disruption of that purchase process, irrespective of any supplier. In those same surveys, we also asked those customers a series of questions around how would they rate the value and importance of different content attributes of the content they were consuming from various suppliers. And when you put all that together mathematically, it allows you to essentially answer the question, what are the attributes of supplier content, or if you will, content more broadly, that are most likely to lead to unteaching, to disrupting, to challenging customers' thinking. So here's the bar chart. So this bar chart I'm showing you here on this slide is the vertical axis. The y-axis is the magnitude of driver impact. So the bigger the bar, so anything below the line is going to have a negative impact on changing customers' direction, and anything above the line is going to have a positive impact. So is more likely to disrupt or change customers' buying. Now, anything in light blue, which by the way is everything I'm showing you so far, is actually statistically not significant. So what all that means is that everything that you're seeing so far doesn't actually matter. So if you stop and think about this, it actually makes a ton of sense. If you look at the bar on the right, so being accessible and quick to find, well, by the way, that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing, but it's not sufficient to change what customers are doing. It's not like they're going to say, man, that content was really easy to find. We need to change everything we're doing. So I think we'd all agree that makes a ton of sense. The one that's so surprising here, though, is the one on the far left of these 4, which is representing a smart and expert perspective. Now, the reason why that's so intriguing to us, because that's the heart and soul of everyone's thought leadership initiatives today. That's the one we all aspire to do, is we need to be out there and be thought leaders in our industry. We need to prove to the world that we've got new and important things to say, and if we put that in the white papers and blog posts and tweets and you name it, and we can demonstrate to our customers that we are smart and progressive and thinking new thoughts, that's gonna allow us to compete more effectively in the world of the Blue Arrow. But in the world of the Blue Arrow, if what we're trying to do is disrupt that or unteach our customers, it turns out just being a thought leader alone is not anywhere sufficient in making that happen. Rather, if you want to think about what would we have to do in our content to make that happen, it's these 2 bars now that we'll add on the left. These are the only 2 things we found in our research that actually had a statistically significant impact on changing customers' purchase direction. And take a look at what they are. So the bar on the left is teaching customers about their business needs and challenges. And for those of you who print this out later and spend some time sharing it with your colleagues, I would underline, highlight, italicize if you could, the word their. So teaching customers about their business needs and challenges. In other words, it's not teaching the customer about the world or the new technology or the new trend, cloud computing or identity theft or global warming or whatever it is, right? We're all talking about the new big ideas that are coming down the pike and what they might mean for your business. But very, very specifically, it's teaching customers not about what they could be doing, but what they are currently doing, something about their business challenges right now. And then notice bar number 2 is equally important in terms of the story here, which is providing customers compelling reasons to take action. Giving your customers a reason to change their behavior. Because, Connor, I would imagine you'd agree with this. What's so interesting, a couple hundred people on the call today, what's so interesting, the incredible diversity of individuals on our call today, what's so interesting is despite all that diversity, we all sell the same thing. And you know what we sell? Every one of us, we all sell change. So whether it's trying to get our customers to stop buying this and start buying that, stop buying from the competition, start buying from us, stop buying our old technology, start buying our new technology, stop doing it yourself and outsource it us, one way or another, what we're trying to do is get our customers to change their behavior. That's what we're all trying to do in sales. Now stop and think about why does it matter? It actually matters a lot, because if I were to ask you what's the one thing most customer organizations want to avoid at all costs if they can, it's change, right? It's why? Because it's risky, it's expensive, it's disruptive. I don't want to change. But put those two together, it lands in this really complex, really tough world that, Connor, you live in every single day just like I do, right? Which is, do you ever stop and think about the one thing we're selling is the one thing our customers don't want to be buying? It's like, it's no wonder sales today is so hard, right? But if you put that together in the context of this bar chart, it actually makes a ton of sense that the thing we've got to get our customers to want to do is not so much buy our solution, but to change their behavior. That's our competition. That's the thing we're up against, is the belief that what they're doing right now may not be perfect, but you know what it is? It's good enough. And that's who we lose to every day. We don't lose to the competition. We lose to status quo. We lose to good enough. We even lose to our own technology that we sold them 5 years ago because, you know what, it's still okay. And so what we have to do is convince our customers that they've got to change what they're doing. Our friends at ADP have got a great phrase for this. They say, the way they talk, and they're well down the path of Challenger, they often say, we need to teach our customers that the pain of same is greater than the pain of change. We need to teach our customers that the pain of same is greater than the pain of change, because ultimately otherwise we live in a world where you pitch your solution, you show your customers how great all your new technology is, and if you do it well, you know what's going to happen? I imagine, Connor, this happened to your team, right? They'll look you in the eye and say, that's amazing. You guys, this is incredible what your stuff can do. Man, I want to partner with you. That's incredible. But you know what? I got to tell you, as much as I want to partner with you, in fact, that's why you're one of the 3 companies that we invited to participate in this RFP, because we already knew that you guys could do that. But the other 2 guys, they're a little bit cheaper, and their solution, while it's not as good as yours, it's good enough. And so if I can get your better solution at their lower price, we're good to go. And it's like, shoot me now. But we all live in this world where the bogey here is to get your customers to realize they need to change more than they realize. They need to change more than they want. So the aspects of content, of insight, is not just be smart, but it's provide content that is specifically about what your customer is doing right now and why that current behavior is exposing them to cost or risk or lost opportunity in ways they haven't fully appreciated. And that's what Insight's really about. I got one more slide to kind of sum up that idea, and then we can call the ball there. But let me stop just for a second, Connor, and see if either there's questions or just I would imagine, again, this stuff is it's funny because when I share these stories, I'm literally in my mind thinking about how this just personally happened to me and one of our customers just 2 weeks ago. Right? This stuff it's the battle we're all fighting every single day, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I mean, how often has a sales rep walked out of a sale before and says, they have to make this change, they have to do this, and then the customer doesn't, and they just can't fathom why they didn't move, and it's because they're doing the job in some way or function right now, and we just didn't explain to them the benefits in such a way that you could break inertia. And so I think that's a real challenge that all of us face.
It's funny. It's so interesting because when you really play this out in detail, right, the logic here is so inescapable, and yet it won't actually get you to a place that helps, right? Because when you walk out of that conversation you just described, kind of, right, it's like, man, the customer, like, either they won't buy from us or they'll buy the smaller solution, but they won't pay us the price we deserve. It's like, essentially, it kind of boils down to they won't pay us for all of that incremental value that we provide. We spend so much time and effort and money and work developing this far better solution that can help our customers in so many new and better ways, and they just won't pay us for all that incremental value that we provide. And watch the logic, because the logic is, well, if our customers won't pay us for all the incremental value that we provide, you know what? They just don't get it. They just don't understand all those great ways that we can help. And so if they don't understand all the incremental value that we provide, then naturally the thing we must do is explain even more clearly all the incremental value that we provide. So you get the mandate from your CEO or from the head of marketing, we need to tighten up our value proposition. We need to get crisper on our value articulation. One head of marketing told me a couple of weeks ago, he said, if we got any crisper in our value proposition, we'd have to write it on a cracker. It's like, but that's what we all do, because we think like they don't understand us, and so we go in trying to explain us even more effectively. But what this data tells us, what experience and all these other parts of these story tell us, is a thing that customers don't fully understand is not us, but themselves, and the fact that what they are doing is exposing the cost and risk in ways they haven't fully appreciated. So the conversation can't be about, let me tell you one more great thing our capability allows you to do. It's rather, let me tell you one more cost that your current behavior is creating for you in ways you haven't appreciated. Those are two totally different conversations. One's a challenger conversation. One is classic, 2002 solution selling pitch.
Let's cap it on this last slide, and then we'll open up the Q&A.
Yep.
And so take it away, Brent.
Yeah, I'm a pretty simple guy. I come from the Midwest of the United States. I'm from Omaha, so I like pictures, right? I like to talk in simple pictures. So let me take everything we talked about and sum it up in a simple sort of picture diagram. Think of this, we call this the egg diagram, and it's really meant to sort of separate all of the different kinds of content that we might create, that our sales reps might share with customers, that our marketing team might create, that we might put into our content marketing engine. And there's all sorts of content, right? And from sort of outside to inside, what we're trying to do is work to the inside, because it's the inside where we unteach our customers, challenge our thinking, and ensure that we get paid in the process. So on the far outside is just general information. And general information that's the information our customers spend more time filtering out than taking in, right? So first of all, we just got to get heard in the first place. And marketers on the call today would be the first thing they would agree with, right? So it's if you kind of squint, you'll notice there's sort of a filter on this egg diagram on the left side, which is in order to get past this general information, whatever content we have to create, it has to be credible. This has got to be, and it's got to be relevant to whoever we're talking to. If it's not relevant, it's not credible, you won't even get heard at all. But even if it's credible and relevant, that just gets you to accepted information. And accepted information is that mountain of data and statistics that we all produce thinking, we've just produced insight, right? 95% of CIOs are concerned about what cloud computing means for their organization. And it's like, you know what? That didn't teach me anything new. I didn't maybe know it was 95%, but I knew it was a lot of them, right? So you haven't actually taught me anything really new, which is the mountain of data. Data is data. It's not insight. So I've got to be newsworthy. That's our next filter. Teach me something new that I didn't know before. But even then, that just gets me to thought leadership. Now, thought leadership is the dangerous one here, because it's not only the one we're doing, it's the one we all aspire to be doing. And to be fair, for the first time in this diagram, thought leadership, it does in fact teach me something new about the world I didn't know before, but it doesn't necessarily drive action. So I read the white paper, I read the blog post, I learn something new, say, wow, that was really interesting, and I go back to whatever I was doing before, and I say, wow, that was fascinating. I wonder what's for lunch, right? So in order to get into this world of insight, we have to be in that next filter is be frame breaking. And frame breaking is the idea we actually need to not just give our customers a new idea to think, but to undermine or challenge an idea that they already think. We have to so insight is not about one thing, it's about two things. It's not just a story about what you could be doing. Insight is equally as much a story about what you are currently doing and why that current behavior is costing you money, exposing you to risk in ways you haven't fully appreciated. So insight is a juxtaposition. It's a juxtaposition between the cost of current behavior and the potential for alternate action. And in that contrast is where you find insight. In that contrast is where you unteach your customers. Now notice you still have to get paid for all this, right? Because otherwise you go out and you unteach your customers, show them a new way to think. They take that idea, they put it in the RFP, put out the bid, your competitor wins the business. That doesn't feel good. So we got to get paid for all of that insight at the end of the day. Otherwise you're just in the free consulting business. No one ever drove margins up doing that, right? So whatever you teach your customers about their business needs to lead back, our last filter needs to lead back to your unique strengths. And that gets us to the center or the sort of the juicy blue yolk of our insight egg here. That's kind of gross. But it gets us to the center of our diagram here, which is what we call commercial insight. Commercial insight is insight that you can monetize. It challenges the customer and what they're thinking, which is, by the way, remember, what they're looking for, but in a way that exclusively leads back to something that you can help them with better than anyone else. So when they look at you and say, I got to change what I'm doing, who can help me with this? You got to be able to look them in the eye and say, let me show you how we can help you with that better than anyone else. But all of that means you actually have to understand what your unique strengths are that allow it. Because the question here, to get to that dark blue center, the question that you got to answer is not what do we do well, but the question is not what are our strengths. That's an easy list to put together, I hope, for most of us, but rather what are our unique strengths? And even more importantly, what are our sustainable unique strengths? So we spend a lot of time with our membership around the world running workshops and even longer-term engagements, helping them figure out what their unique strengths are, how are they sustainable, and then how do I back off of that and build a commercial insight that challenges customers' thinking, not based on how customers think about you, are they like you, are they happy, are they satisfied, will they advocate for you, but rather how those customers think about themselves and how we can disrupt that thinking on their own. And that's just a brief version of sort of Challenger and a commercial organization built around the Challenger idea.
Thanks so much. So, hey, Brent, quick question. This is actually a really good one. So, in a lot of cases, we're trying to, a lot of our customers out there that are driving sales are trying to present a prospect with a return on investment or a TCO message. And so how do you feel like that differs from actually a commercial insight?
You know, it's a great question. I'll try to do this briefly, but we've got a lot of thinking on this because the ROI, the TCO, the LVA, the lifetime value assessment, still crucially important here, but very different. Because in this world, the very best Challenger organizations still use ROI type tools, but they're calculating a completely different ROI, right? So most ROI tools are designed to calculate the ROI, the return on investment of buying our solution versus the competitor solution. We might be a little more upfront, but look at all the money we can save you over the next coming years. But in this world, remember, the story isn't about you. It's about the customer. So the ROI calculator is a very different, it's what we call a supplier agnostic ROI. There's nothing about you in the ROI calculator at all. Rather, what you're calculating for your customer is the return to them if they change their behavior from this to that. And you're nowhere in, so it's helping your customer understand the math and building that math with them. Say, if you were to stop doing this and start doing that, look at the money you can save, the risk you can mitigate, the money you can make. And if you do that effectively, they're going to look at you and say, holy mackerel, I didn't realize there's so much at stake. Who can help me with this? And that brings us back to, well, let me show you how we can help you with that better than anyone else. So while you are not in the ROI calculator, it's about the customer. It's got to lead back to your unique strengths nonetheless.
So, hey, one more question, and this is actually a really good one. So, in a lot of cases, we talk about how the marketing organization needs to think about the content that they're building, the messages, the insights that they're helping to arm their sales reps to be more Challenger-like. What's your thought or your view of actually using independent or paid vendor studies as a way to push customers out of their comfort zone or as a way to try and derive that commercial insight?
It can be incredibly effective, particularly more credible ones, right? If you're like, I just pull one out of the blue, like a J.D. Power study or something like that. You know, some of those that third-party research, in fact, if you can lean on it, can be incredibly powerful and very valuable. The caveat is just always make sure that whatever evidence you use, whether you've created or someone else used it or has created it, it always has to meet what we call the burden of proof. In other words, it has to be believable. It's got to be credible. And if what you're trying to convince your customers to believe is pretty hard to believe, the more data, the more credible that data is going to have to be. But watch out whether it's your data or an outside party's data. Either way, the story that you're telling using that data, again, never forget, has to lead back to a strength that you have over everyone else. So it might be third-party data, but it helps build a story that leads back to your unique strengths.
Terrific. Thanks. I think that's a good place to wrap, Brent. This has been fantastic, and I really want to thank everyone who participated and listening in and just learning a little bit about how sales and sales culture is changing and how as a sales profession we need to change both how we deliver messages, how we create messages, and how we support our customers and what real value actually means to them in the terms of loyalty. And I really want to thank Brent for taking the time to join us. He's just, I quite frankly wish this was a 2-hour session. I could sit here and listen to his insights all day what's happening in the sales space. Thank you so much. And certainly contact CEB if you want to engage one-on-one with Brent and his team. They do a fantastic job in one-on-one engagements as well in these broad group settings. And so thank you so much, Brent, for your time.
Absolutely, Connor. Happy to. It's always fun to talk about this stuff. It's both fascinating and a little bit scary, so happy to help.